Hey everyone, welcome back for another deep dive.
It's good to be here.
Today we're going to be looking at something that's really kind of hot in the news right now up here in Canada, and that is the gun buyback program.
Yeah, very, very hot topic.
We've got an article here that's really taking kind of a critical look at the program and makes some pretty interesting points.
Yeah,
So I'm excited to dive into this and kind of see what we can learn.
I think there's a lot to unpack here.
Yeah, so I guess to start off, for any of our listeners who maybe aren't super familiar with this program, maybe you could just give a quick overview of kind of what it is and why it's causing so much controversy.
Sure. So essentially, the Canadian government has banned a huge number of firearms, like almost 2,500 makes and models,
Wow.
and they're actively buying them back from owners.
Okay.
And it sounds simple enough on paper, but like you said, there's a lot of controversy surrounding it.
2,500. That's a lot of guns.
Yeah, it's a massive undertaking.
So what are some of the main sticking points here? Like what's making people so upset about this?
Well, one of the biggest issues is the sheer scope of the ban.
Okay.
We're talking about a huge range of firearms, including some that are very popular among law-abiding gun owners.
Like what kind of guns are we talking about here?
Well, one that's been particularly controversial is the SKS rifle.
Okay.
It's a semi-automatic rifle that's very common in Canada, especially in rural areas and among Indigenous communities.
Okay. I can see how that would be controversial if they're trying to take away guns that people rely on for things like hunting.
Exactly, and that's one of the main arguments against the inclusion of the SKS in the buyback.
Gotcha.
Indigenous groups argue that it's an essential tool for hunting and for their cultural practices,
Right.
and they see it as an infringement on their rights. Plus, on a more practical level, adding the SKS to the buyback is expected to significantly increase the cost of the program.
Oh, wow. So how much are we talking here?
Well, initial estimates were around $200 million,
Wow.
but now experts are saying it could easily reach $2 billion or even more.
$2 billion.
Yeah, and if they include the SKS, that number could potentially double again.
So we're talking potentially $4 billion.
It's a lot of money.
Yeah, that's a huge amount of taxpayer money. And it makes you wonder, is it really worth it?
Well, that's the big question, isn't it?
Yeah, and I mean, beyond just the cost issue, I know there's some other concerns about the effectiveness of the program too, right?
Absolutely.
Like, is it actually going to do what it's supposed to do, which is reduce gun violence?
That's the goal, but the evidence is mixed.
Really?
Yeah, some studies have shown that buyback programs can have a small impact on gun violence,
Okay.
but others have found no significant effect.
So it's not a guaranteed solution.
Not at all. And in fact, there's even some evidence to suggest that gun violence might actually increase after a buyback.
Wait, what? How is that possible?
Well, one theory is that when you remove a lot of legally owned guns from circulation, it can actually create a black market for illegal guns.
Okay, so it could kind of backfire in that way.
Potentially.
Interesting.
And this isn't just speculation either. New Zealand implemented a similar buyback program back in 2019, and they actually saw an increase in gun crime afterwards.
Wow, that's pretty concerning.
It is, and it just goes to show that this is a really complex issue.
Yeah, it's definitely not as simple as just saying, let's take away all the guns and everything will be better.
Right. There are a lot of factors at play here, and we need to be careful about jumping to conclusions.
So it sounds like there's a real debate about whether this buyback program is the right approach.
Absolutely. There are strong arguments on both sides.
And I think one of the most important questions is, are we focusing on the right problem here?
Exactly. Are we targeting the right people?
Because if the goal is to reduce gun violence, shouldn't we be going after the criminals who are actually using guns to commit crimes?
That's what a lot of people are saying.
Yeah.
And in fact, there's been a lot of pushback from law enforcement on this very point.
Like, what are they saying?
Well, for example, the RCMP union has been very vocal in its opposition to the buyback program.
Really?
Yeah, they argue that it's diverting resources away from fighting the illegal gun trade, which they see as a much bigger threat.
That makes sense.
Yeah, they're saying that instead of focusing on buying back guns from law-abiding citizens, we should be putting more effort into stopping the flow of illegal guns into the country.
Okay, so they're basically saying we're going after the wrong people.
Pretty much, and they're not alone. The Toronto Police Association has also been critical of the buyback.
Okay.
They've said that the gun ban isn't working and that we should be focusing on criminals instead.
So it seems like there's a real concern that this program is misdirecting our resources.
Yeah, and that it's not actually addressing the root causes of gun violence.
And I think that's a really important point to consider because If we're going to spend billions of dollars on something, we want to make sure it's actually going to make a difference.
Exactly.
And it seems like there's a lot of doubt about whether this buyback program is going to do that.
There is, and it's a debate that we need to have.
Absolutely, because at the end of the day, we all want the same thing.
Right. We want to keep our community safe.
And we need to find the best way to do that.
And that might not be this buyback program.
Right. So let's keep digging into this and see what else we can uncover.
Sounds good.
Okay, so we've talked about the cost, and we've talked about the effectiveness or lack thereof.
Right.
But there's another big issue here that I want to touch on.
Okay, what's that?
And that's the impact this program is having on law-abiding gun owners.
Yeah, that's a huge concern.
Because a lot of these people feel like they're being unfairly targeted.
They do, and I can understand why.
Yeah, me too. Because they're the ones who are following the rules.
Exactly. They're the ones who went through all the proper channels to get their licenses and register their firearms.
And now they're being told that they have to give them up.
Yep. And for many of them, it's more than just giving up a gun.
Right. It's about their rights.
It's about their way of life.
It's about their hobbies.
Exactly.
And for some people, it's even about their livelihoods.
Yeah, if you're a hunter or a farmer, or you work in a profession where you need a firearm.
This buyback program could have a real impact on your ability to do your job.
Absolutely. And that's something that I think often gets overlooked in this debate.
Yeah, it's easy to focus on the big picture, like reducing gun violence.
Right.
But we also need to think about the individual people who are affected by these policies.
And their stories are important.
Yeah. So let's take a closer look at that and hear from some of the people who are actually being impacted by this gun buyback program.
I think that's a great idea.
All right, so let's do that.
Let's do it.
All right, so we've heard a lot about the concerns from law enforcement about this program being potentially misguided.
Yeah, they're definitely not on board with it.
But I'm curious, like, are there other people kind of echoing those same concerns?
Oh, absolutely. You've got academics who are studying gun violence. They're saying a lot of the same things. Yeah, their research suggests that these kinds of buyback programs, they often don't really target the people who are most likely to commit gun violence.
So they're saying the people turning in their guns aren't the ones out there committing crimes.
Pretty much. And it makes sense, right?
Yeah. I mean, someone who's willing to participate in a program like this, they're probably already following the law.
Exactly. They're not the ones causing trouble.
So what are the academics suggesting we do instead?
Well, they argue that we need to focus more on addressing the root causes of gun violence.
Okay, so things like poverty and mental health issues and gang activity.
Exactly. Those are the kinds of things that really drive gun violence.
Makes sense.
And those are not easy problems to solve.
No, they're very complex.
But if we want to make a real difference, that's where we need to focus our efforts.
So it sounds like there's a growing consensus that this buyback program isn't the silver bullet solution.
Yeah, I think that's becoming more and more clear.
But it still leaves us with the question of what do we do then?
Right. Where do we go from here?
If we're not going to buy back all these guns, what are the alternatives?
Well, as we've already discussed, cracking down on the illegal gun trade is a big one.
Okay, so stopping those guns from coming into the country in the first place.
Yeah, that's huge. And that means strengthening border security, working with other countries to track the flow of firearms.
Makes sense, but what about the guns that are already here illegally?
Well, that's where community-based initiatives come in.
Okay, so like programs that work with at-risk youth.
Exactly. Things like mentorship programs, conflict resolution training, job training.
So trying to prevent young people from getting involved in gun violence in the first place.
That's the goal. Give them alternatives.
And then on the mental health side.
Yeah, we need to do a lot more to support people who are struggling with mental health issues.
Because that can be a big factor in gun violence too, right?
Absolutely. And it's often overlooked.
So we need to make sure that people have access to the help they need.
Yeah, and that there's no stigma around seeking help.
That's so important.
It is, and it's something we need to talk about more openly.
I agree. So it seems like we're talking about a much more holistic approach here.
Yeah, it's not just about guns. It's about addressing the underlying social and economic conditions that contribute to violence.
And it's about investing in our communities.
Exactly, giving people the support and the resources they need to thrive.
I think that's a really important takeaway from this whole conversation.
It is, and it's something we need to keep in mind as we move forward.
Yeah, because this is a long-term problem.
It is. There's no quick fix.
And it's going to require sustained effort from all of us.
Absolutely. But it's an effort that's worth making.
I agree, because at the end of the day, we all want the same thing.
We want to live in safe communities.
And we want our children to grow up in a world where they don't have to fear gun violence.
That's the goal.
So let's keep working towards that goal.
Let's do it.
Okay, so we've talked about a lot of different things today.
Yeah, we've covered a lot of ground.
But I think it's all really come down to one central question.
What's that?
What is the best way to address gun violence in Canada?
Yeah, that's the million-dollar question.
And unfortunately, there's no easy answer.
Nope, it's complex.
But I think by having these conversations, by exploring different perspectives,
Right.
by really digging into this issue,
Yeah.
we can start to find our way towards solutions.
We can and we have to.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Because this is an issue that affects all of us.
It does.
And it's something that we need to take seriously.
Absolutely.
So as we wrap up this deep dive,
Yeah.
I want to leave you with one final thought.
Okay, go for it.
What do you think is the best way to reduce gun violence in Canada?
That's a tough one.
It is, but it's a question that I think we all need to be asking ourselves.
Yeah, we all have a role to play in this.
So take some time to reflect on that,
Think about what you've learned.
and maybe even do some more research on your own.
Absolutely.
Because the more informed we are, the better equipped we'll be to find solutions.
I couldn't agree more.
All right, well, that's all for today.
It's been a pleasure.
Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.
Thanks for having me.
And we'll see you next time.
See you later.
It really feels like we've kind of hit this point where we have to ask ourselves, okay, what now?
Yeah, where do we go from here?
I mean, knowing everything we've talked about, the buyback, the arguments for and against it, the costs,
The whole 9 yards, yeah.
it kind of begs the question, like, how do we as Canadians actually move forward on this issue of gun violence?
That's the big one, isn't it?
Yeah, because it doesn't feel like there's this one easy answer.
No silver bullet.
It's so complex.
Yeah, it's going to take a lot more than just, passing a law or throwing money at the problem.
Right. It
Yeah.
feels like it's going to require like a real shift in how we think about this issue.
Yeah, a more holistic approach for sure.
And I think that starts with being willing to have these tough conversations.
Exactly like the one we're having now.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Being open to different perspectives, challenging our own assumptions.
Absolutely, because nobody has all the answers here.
No, and I think it's easy to get caught up in the emotions of it all,
Oh, yeah, for sure.
especially when you're talking about something as sensitive as gun violence.
It's a very personal issue for a lot of people.
Yeah, and it's important to acknowledge that.
Absolutely. We need to approach this with empathy and understanding.
Yeah, and be willing to listen to each other, even when we disagree.
I think that's key, being able to have these conversations respectfully.
Yeah, because at the end of the day, we all want the same thing.
We want to live in safe communities.
We want to protect our families.
And we want to find solutions that actually work.
And I think that's what's so important about what we're doing here today.
Yeah, having these conversations is crucial.
Shining a light on this issue, exploring different perspectives.
Absolutely. The more informed we are, the better decisions we can make.
And the more likely we are to find solutions that actually work.
I couldn't agree more.
So I want to thank you for joining us for this deep dive.
It's been a pleasure.
It's been really enlightening.
Yeah, I've learned a lot.
Me too. And I hope our listeners have as well.
I hope so.
And I want to encourage everyone to continue this conversation.
Yeah, don't let it end here.
Talk to your friends, talk to your family, do your own research.
Absolutely stay engaged.
Because this is an issue that affects us all.
It does, and we all have a role to play in finding solutions.
And remember, even small actions can make a difference.
Yeah, every little bit helps.
So let's keep working together to create a safer, more peaceful Canada.
I'm all for that.
All right, well, that's all for today.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for being here.
It's been great.
And we'll see you next time for another deep dive.
See you later.